Welcome back. For some of us, the idea of watching others playing video games would seem to make no sense at all. In some circles, the idea of being a professional player of video games is just ridiculous. But as CGTN's Ramah Nyang now explains, not only are both of those fast-growing and lucrative occupations, they're also at the heart of a multi-billion-dollar business.
Thank you, Richard. I do remember having this conversation 2 decades ago as a teenager. The idea of being a professional gamer, much less one from Africa, was simply not a viable option. Say that to an African parent and see yourself getting laughed out of the room. Esports, much less the video game business, wasn't something that was taken seriously. But that is no longer the case if you know where to look. So just last year, for example, PricewaterhouseCoopers estimated that the video game industry around the world will be worth $162 billion in 2023. That's roughly half of South Africa's GDP. Esports is still a small part of that, but it's growing very rapidly. Back in 2014, spending on esports was relatively small, just $194 million. But last year, that number rose to $980 million. Before this pandemic, it was forecast to grow by around 18% a year to close to $2 billion by 2023. Now, here's another way of looking at how big the size of the esports market is and how fast it's growing. Back in 2014, Amazon bought out a company that you probably may not have heard of, unless you're a gamer, called Twitch. He paid about $970 million for that company. Today, that streaming service isn't just worth nearly $4 billion. It's also the biggest streaming site for video game content worldwide. It's even bigger than Google-owned YouTube. And much like Netflix, it's benefited from the movement restrictions around the world. The average number of viewers jumped from 1.35 million in January to just under 2.5 million in April. Now, for comparison, that's more than the 1.7 million people who tuned in to watch the Liverpool-Arsenal match in the 2018-2019 season in the UK. And Twitch does this virtually every day. So if you have audiences that big and that dedicated, it can often translate into some pretty big prize pools. So take, for example, Tiger Woods, right? Last year, he won the US Masters in Augusta in April. He walked away with about $2 million for that particular tournament win. Barely 3 months later, this young 16-year-old, Kyle Justoff, he won a Fortnite tournament and walked home with $3 million. The number 2 in that tournament got about $1.8 million. So if your child comes up to you and says they want to be a pro gamer, this sort of thing might explain why. But to be fair, it's not just about earth-shattering amounts of money. This is a very computing-intensive sport. And when not gaming, that computing power can be donated, quite literally, elsewhere. So the combined donated processing power to the Folding at Home project, worth Googling that, by the way, which runs research into a range of diseases, cancer, Parkinson's disease, and now COVID-19. If you put all of that computing power together, it's more than the world's top 500 supercomputers combined. We're talking about exaflops here. This is simply a billion times a billion calculations every second. It's pretty impressive what gamers can do when they put their minds together. That's a very brief primer into the world of esports. Richard, back to you.